So NVIDIA gave a presentation at the recent Consumer Electronics Show, in which they showcased their new 50 series GPUs, talked about the technology packed into them, and talked quite a bit about how AI is changing the game when it comes to what is possible with modern graphics. Now, I myself use NVIDIA stuff. I've got a 40 series card in my rig, and this video is recorded using a combination of OBS and NVIDIA Broadcast, making my webcam look a little better than it really is. And so it makes sense that in this presentation, they didn't just talk video games. The applications for their AI tech are wide-ranging. In a very Skynet move, they even showcased our future robot overlords. But I want to focus right now on the graphics tech, as it touches on a question that I've been mulling over for a bit. At what point does the level of realism in a game present a moral challenge to us? You might say it's wrapped up with the question of when does a game become a simulation? Growing up, I got to witness a good number of gaming controversies and watch how that conversation kind of evolved over the years. Early on, one of the big ones concerned Mortal Kombat, with the buckets of blood and the gory fatalities you could pull off in the original game. Nowadays, that looks quite tame compared to the newer games in that series. But remember that back then, there was still a strong cultural assumption that games are for kids, and so no small amount of scandal was stirred up. Later on, we would get a lot of voices sounding the alarm about Grand Theft Auto, with politicians and news commentators noting how you could hire a prostitute and then run her over with your car and commit any number of horrible atrocities because, well, of course you could, it's GTA. After that, Call of Duty made waves. One might think especially of the no Russian level in Modern Warfare 2. And we started to hear games occasionally described as murder simulators. Back in the day, that language always struck me as out of touch. There's always an attempt to pin the evils of society on this or that new trend in pop culture. For a while, it was that dangerous rock and roll music that was corrupting the youth. Then the irreverence of TV shows like The Simpsons. In video games, they just seemed like the latest whipping boy in that crusade. Now, I did and still do support moves like a rating system, and simply having parents who pay attention to what their kids are consuming. There are games which young children absolutely should not be exposed to. I've reviewed some of them on this channel, and it would always bother me when I would hear, for instance, of a friend whose husband would play Gears of War, chainsawing dudes in half, right in front of their 4 or 5-year-old children. It's a preciously brief period of time in which your kids get to experience a bit of childhood innocence. That time, especially today, is going to evaporate very fast, with or without your help. And while you can err on the side of over-sheltering your kids, I've spoken about the dangers of that in the past, you can also err in the opposite direction. Maybe don't be in too much of a rush to snuff that fleeting innocence out. But in any case, when non-gamers would lay the blame on video games in a broad sense, my instinct was naturally to defend the goodness of gaming. In particular, that assumption about games are for kids. That was already outdated a long time ago, just as not all books or movies are intended for every age group. Games likewise are made for a wide spectrum of people. And when commentators would link violent video games to real-world violence, again my instinctual response would be, if you can't clearly distinguish fictional violence from the real thing, then the blame probably rests with you, not with the game studio. You may need to see a psychiatrist, and maybe a priest. But the thing is, with these leaps forward in graphical fidelity, we're reaching a point at which that distinction may no longer be so obvious. Returning again to that question of, when does a game become a simulation? And thus, when does that charge of a game being a murder simulator, when does it actually hold weight? In the past, I would say that once the realism goal outweighs the fun factor goal. You can have both of those things, but if delivering a fun experience is secondary to replicating reality, then what you're playing is more a simulation than a game. At that point, morally speaking, it does matter tremendously what you're simulating. But today, even if a game streamlines many of the realism factors, The sheer fidelity of the presentation can lead to that line growing increasingly blurred. As someone who's been gaming my whole life, I can usually tell right away whether I'm looking at a real or a computer generated image. But if I were to show, like the average grandma, a screenshot from the new Indiana Jones game, I guarantee you many would think, yeah, that's a screen cap of young Harrison Ford. Any number of scenes in that game, if shown out of context, could be taken for a photograph. And with advances like the neural rendering techniques that NVIDIA has showcased, using AI to give the faces of game characters those extra little lifelike touches, telling what is real and what is not will soon be a genuine challenge. Beyond just the visuals, having AI-powered interactions will also be a literal game changer. Many of you have probably seen footage or personally made use of an AI NPC mod for Skyrim, allowing you to have conversations with the game characters that are probably more interesting than you might have with some actual humans. Think about the implications of that tech if it were applied, for instance, to giving your enemies a sense of self-preservation. Usually, that's something I really appreciate in a game, when the enemies are not suicidal in their quest to take you down, but rather make some attempt to preserve their lives. I love it when, in a game like The Forest, if the cannibals you're fighting realize that they're outmatched, they'll actually run away, or at least wait for backup or regroup before again trying to take you on. That dynamic is always a great touch. But now, suppose you're playing the new Call of Duty or Rainbow Six, and the AI-enhanced enemies, they have a more convincing sense of self-preservation. Maybe you shoot one of the enemy soldiers, he's wounded, but not dead, and he starts begging you, please spare me, I want to live. And then you fire again, you shoot him in the arm. He's writhing on the ground, crying out in pain, no more, please. And then you shoot him in the leg. It's just a game, it's not real, there's no moral weight behind your actions. Well, I'm not so sure. Experiences of that sort are right around the corner. Video game characters which both look and behave in a convincingly real fashion will be here very soon. If you don't believe that, you're just not paying attention. And those old, out-of-touch sounding accusations of games being murder simulators, they may no longer be so out of touch. As far as the ways that emerging AI tech will change how we play games, what I've discussed here is really only the tip of the iceberg. There are plenty of aspects, both concerning and exciting, about this technology. I can imagine a future in which, when I get the urge to play a new Mega Man X game, I could then write down some ridiculous names for robot masters. One of them could be Java Junkie Giraffe, and give those names to an AI which would then generate a whole new game in the style of the 16 or 32-bit classics. There are a ton of awesome applications for this stuff, but also some new moral challenges. How prepared are we for both the possibilities and the dangers that lie ahead? And that's all I've got for today. May you go with God, may you like and subscribe, and may we pray for one another. Until we meet again.